Black Myth Wukong is an upcoming action RPG that promises to be one of the next great entries in the Souls-like genre. From what we've seen in the trailers so far, the game will offer crisp graphics, intense and inventive gameplay, and overall, this is something that many are looking forward to. But there's one thing that interests me the most: the lore. Clearly, Black Myth Wukong is a game that's very concerned with earnestly showcasing the myth of Sun Wukong, and the story of Journey to the West. The trailers and gameplay we have seen so far are dripping with details that fans of Journey to the West will easily recognise, from gameplay mechanics to boss encounters. But even for those who know Sun Wukong, there are already mysteries that tell us that this story will have plenty of surprises for everyone. I do think this will be a game that is better to experience if you have a basic understanding of Sun Wukong and the story of Journey to the West. So in this video, I will be breaking down the trailers and gameplay reveals, and comparing them to the source material of Journey to the West and that story of Sun Wukong. I will be looking at gameplay and story elements and how they tie into that original story, before finally speculating on how I believe the story of the game will play out. And remember that if you like lore, then consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, as it helps me out enormously. Before we go any further, I do need to let you know that this video is sponsored by the developers of Black Myth Wukong, Game Science. Game Science asked me to dissect the trailers from a lore perspective, and introduce people to the character of Sun Wukong and the story of Journey to the West. Before taking this sponsorship, I did feel the need to confirm with the developers if there would be any microtransactions in this game, and I am happy to tell you that the game will not have any microtransactions. Black Myth Wukong is releasing on August 20th, and you can wishlist it on Steam and Epic if you are interested in the game. Additionally, the developers will be running a Mythology and Sweepstakes contest where you can win an Nvidia graphics card, custom controller, and other bits of merch. Follow my link below if you want to wishlist the game, and thanks to Game Science for sponsoring this video. With that said, let us now unpack the mysteries of Black Myth Wukong. Just some housekeeping before we get into the analysis. The version of the book that I am using as a reference and for the source of quotes is the Penguin Classics translation by Julia Lovell. So if my version differs from yours in terms of translation, page numbers, or chapters, this is why. And in general, for those who aren't aware, Journey to the West is a Chinese novel that was published in the 16th century and is attributed to the author Wu Cheng'en. The story is mainly set in the 7th century China during the Tang dynasty, and the main focal character of the story is the aforementioned Sun Wukong. Secondly, the video footage that I'm going to be analysing is from the trailers, gameplay reveals and cinematic reveals that can be found on the official Black Myth Wukong YouTube channel, so if you want to watch the footage in full, then I would highly suggest you go to that channel, as I will be breaking down specific parts from each of these videos rather than showing the entire thing. Even before the game has released, there's already an interesting mystery at play here. The character that we play as is referred to as the Destined One, rather than Sun Wukong explicitly. I think it's quite clear that the relationship between this Destined One and the legendary Sun Wukong will be one of the central mysteries of the game. That being said, there is plenty that ties the Destined One to Sun Wukong, including his powers. Sun Wukong's name is in the title of the game, and the player character is clearly related to Wukong in some way, and thus it behooves us to go over the story of the Monkey King and how it relates to what we see in the trailers. The book Journey to the West begins by telling the entire story of one of its central characters, Sun Wukong. The Monkey King was born from a magic stone that was nurtured by both heaven and earth, yin and yang. This marks Monkey as a special primordial being from the beginning. Essentially, this stone then births a stone monkey, and as he is born, two golden lights shine from his eyes, immediately gaining the attention of heaven and its Jade Emperor. The stone monkey would live among the monkeys of Flowerfruit Mountain for a time, before becoming their king. However, he feared mortality, and thus Monkey seeks out one of the immortals on Earth in order to learn their secrets for himself and become an immortal. He becomes a student of the Taoist immortal Putizushi, who is the one who gives the stone monkey his name, Sun Wukong, meaning the sun who is awoken to emptiness. The name spoke an important truth, for at the beginning of everything there are no names, only emptiness. To advance from emptiness, living creatures must first become aware of it. This quote and Wukong's name is essentially the core of his story. His entire journey is one of enlightenment and learning, in which he transforms from an unruly and chaotic being to someone who is worthy of Buddhahood. Putizushi teaches him a lot of abilities, including his ability to cloud jump, eventually allowing Sun Wukong to jump and travel hundreds of thousands of miles in an instant. But most importantly, his master teaches him the secret to immortality, as well as the 72 transformations, 72 different forms he could take. But in time, he will possess the power of infinite transformations. In the book, we see him transform into a multitude of different things and life forms. A shrine, birds, fish, humans. He even transforms into a giant creature with multiple heads during his fight with a deity called Neza. These abilities of Sun Wukong seem to be at the forefront of the gameplay from what we have seen so far. For example, there seems to be stealth applications to Monkey's transformations in the 12-minute gameplay trailer from 2021. In this, we see the main character disguised as a statue at a temple, and this certainly harkens to the moment where Sun Wukong transformed himself into a shrine in the book when he was trying to hide. Perhaps similar transformations can be used in-game to hide from enemies. In two different gameplay reveals, we also see the title character transform into a golden cicada, and they are able to fly around an area and avoid detection by enemies. This looks like an awesome mechanic, and I wonder if it will be like Sekiro, where we will be able to eavesdrop on unique dialogues between enemies, as it does seem like we can hear the temple guards talking amongst themselves while he is flying around as a cicada. We get further examples of this transformation ability. At one point during what seems to be a set piece, he pursues a flying creature in the form of a bat. However, probably most interesting to me is another transformation that happens during the Wolf Temple section. Further in, the monkey character defeats a sub-boss, a wolf-headed enemy who has a flaming weapon. Once the monkey defeats this enemy, they then pick up and store that weapon. Then later on, in what seems to be the final boss of this area, a giant wolf, the player character transforms into this wolf-headed enemy that they had previously defeated, and uses its powers to defeat the final boss. I therefore speculate that you will unlock numerous transformations throughout the game as you defeat different and specialised enemies, with each having different combat abilities and applications. This takes us to the next bit of Wukong's kit, his signature staff, which he is able to manipulate the size of as and when he needs to. So bear with me as we dive back into the book to learn how Sun Wukong gained this weapon. After learning from Putizushi, he was eventually banished by his teacher, due to the fact that his fellow students learned of Wukong's transformative powers and started to beg him to teach them how. His teacher wisely realised that his fellows would continue to ask for this secret to transformation until Wukong caved and told them, or he refused them. Either situation would cause discord, and thus his teacher told him never to reveal the source of his power and sent him on his way. Upon reclaiming his seat as the Monkey King of Flowerfruit Mountain, he realised that he and his monkey army would need weapons. He eventually ended up in the underwater kingdom of a Dragon King, who he essentially bullied into giving him weapons and armour. This was how he ended up with his golden mail shirt, phoenix feather helmet, and the golden banded staff known as Ruyi Jingu Bang. Wukong is able to grow this staff as and when he needs to, iconically shrinking it down to the size of a needle and putting it into his ear when he needs to store it. And again, this is something we see him do in the 13-minute gameplay reveal trailer from 2020, when he takes the staff out of his ear and grows it back to normal size. The attention to detail from the book is exquisite. To me, this is a very cool example of the lore being integrated into the gameplay, as we see Monkey change the staff during combat for different situations. For example, when he is fighting the dragon in a gameplay demo, we see that he quickly extends its length to poke the dragon while staying out of its deadly reach. Then when this same dragon unleashes a deadly torrent of lightning, Monkey extends his staff and then balances atop it, taking him far out of reach of the damage before coming down from height with a deadly attack. Returning to the story of Journey to the West and the source material, after Wukong bullied the Dragon King for his weapon, the Dragon King would report Sun Wukong to the authorities in heaven, and so began a long back and forth between the Monkey King and the Jade Emperor of Heaven. Initially, the Jade Emperor attempts to control Wukong by giving him a lower position in the heavenly authority. This is just meant to placate him and keep him out of trouble. Firstly, he is the master of horses, which he eventually finds out is a low-ranking job, and so he abandons his duties. Following this, he is eventually given another position, the Great Sage Equal to Heaven, a title that Sun Wukong gave himself in the past, seeing himself as equal or greater than any in heaven, even the Jade Emperor himself. Thus the celestial authorities sought to placate him by allowing this title, building him a manse in heaven, and eventually giving him the job of watching over the heavenly peach garden to keep him out of trouble. These peaches took a long time to ripen, and they could bestow immortality upon those who eat them. Of course, Wukong eventually used his position to devour all of the peaches, extending his life, but causing an issue when the Queen Mother of Heaven sent her maids to collect peaches for the famous Heavenly Peach Party. Not only did the maids find out about the lack of peaches, but they also told Wukong about this party, that it was the social event, and that anyone who was anyone would be there, but that he was not invited because of his lack of status. Of course, he broke into the party, drank all the wine, and then snuck up to the top floors of the Heavenly Palace, and consumed the immortality pills of Laozi, an inhabitant of heaven. Wukong, realising that he had gone too far, returned to his Monkey Kingdom and prepared for war. In return, the Jade Emperor mobilises his forces, including Neza, and the 4 Heavenly Kings. This is the moment where Wukong displays perhaps his most famous power, that of duplication. Wukong defeats the 100,000 strong Celestial army by creating duplicates of himself, which he does by chewing on his hair and creating a sign with his hands. And I quote the book now. As dusk fell, he pulled out a handful of hairs, chewed them up, and changed them into thousands of spacious monkeys, each with their own golden hooped staff. Together, they beat the heavenly commanders into retreat. It's therefore pretty exciting that we see this ability in the gameplay as well. It looks really powerful. Not only are they acting as decoys, but they seem to do a lot of damage as well. I've also wondered if we'd see this power play out in another way. I've noticed in the gameplay that there seems to be moments where Monkey gets a sort of perfect dodge. There is a visual effect on screen, and then a duplicate of Monkey seems to be left behind as a sort of shadow. Perhaps this represents the enemy being tricked by a duplicate Monkey, while the main one gets away. Indeed, this is what happens during Wukong's fight with the aforementioned Neza. Neza is matching Wukong blow for blow, but Wukong then distracts him with a duplicate Monkey. Monkey's quick wits prevailed. In the thick of the fight, he pulled out a strand of hair and transformed it into a perfect likeness of himself. While Neza was fooled by the spacious Monkey, the real one leaped up from behind and hit him hard on the left arm. So far, we can see that Sun Wukong's powers are being translated very well into the game. However, the extent of Sun Wukong's powers do not end there in his story, so let us continue with the story from the book. Eventually Monkey is apprehended, and then he is sentenced to execution by the Jade Emperor, who commands Monkey to be cut up into pieces. However, the executioner's blades cannot even leave a mark on the stone monkey's skin. As an aside, I wonder if we can see the stone skin at play within the gameplay. Looking carefully at the fight with the wolf-headed enemy that I mentioned before, it seems as though the Destined One is able to deflect certain attacks, What's interesting is he just seems to brace himself rather than trying to block or parry with his staff. Perhaps this is the stone skin of the Monkey King coming through in the gameplay, but I'm just speculating of course. For now, let us return to the punishment that the Monkey King had handed down to him by the Emperor. As I mentioned, the executioners were unable to do any damage with their blades because of Sun Wukong's stone skin. Their blades would just deflect off him harmlessly, not even a mark was left. As such, he is then placed in a crucible pot to be cooked alive, melted down, and thus the immortality pills he ate can be retrieved from what's left. However, this punishment did not have the expected results. After 49 days, Monkey survives and bursts out of the pot, and he's more powerful than ever. With the immortality pills and peaches within him, the heat tempered him and infused him with even more power. This transformation is described by Wukong himself in the book, as it reads the following. "Back when I rebelled against heaven," Monkey exulted, "I consumed the elixirs, peaches, and wine of immortality. After I was captured, the heavenly spirits chopped, sliced, skewered, and burned me. There wasn't even a speck of surface damage. A 49-day roasting in Laozi's brazier of the 8 trigrams then gave me blazing eyes, a head of bronze, and arms of iron." Wukong was born special, a primordial being of rock. He then trained under a great immortal tutor, and became even more powerful. Equipped with his magical quarterstaff and armour, he was god levels of powerful. This final tempering only made him more physically powerful, and his blazing eyes gave him the power to see through lies. Wukong's powers are central to his story and his character, and it's really cool to see that the developers have really made this a core gameplay mechanic, with his martial prowess and many abilities being represented in gameplay. A pretty faithful representation of these powers, I must say. However, while these powers align with what we would expect, that's not to say the game is just going to be a one-to-one retelling of the story, as there are clearly some mysteries that are going to play with our expectations. And with that said, let us look at the greater story that we can see in the trailer and speculate on how the story is going to play out. Following Wukong's escape from the brazier, he was eventually tested by the Buddha, who then imprisoned him under a mountain for 500 years, so he may learn patience and humility. After those 500 years had passed, Buddha and his followers find a use for Wukong. He is to accompany a pious monk known as Tang Sanzang on a journey. You see, Buddha laments at the state of the southern continent, which is essentially China, and thus he instructs his disciples to get a plan into motion, to find the most pious individual possible in the Tang Empire, to travel west to India, to collect Buddha's original scriptures, the sutras. The journey is perilous and many demons hunger for the monk's soul, and thus he requires protectors. These protectors are all beings who require penance for their past transgressions. Sun Wukong for his hubris and chaotic actions. Pigsy, a once heavenly marshal, who was banished to Earth for his lecherous behaviour, and unfortunately reincarnated as a pigman, his outside reflecting his inner nature. Then there is Sandy, a riverside demon, who was once again a celestial general, who was banished for breaking a particularly important vase. Then there is also the third son of a dragon king, who is scheduled for execution, but is pardoned so long as he accompanies the monk as well. However, after devouring Sanjiang's horse, he essentially serves as his horse for the entirety of the journey. What is interesting is I feel like we can maybe see some of these characters in the trailers and gameplay footage as well. For example, the dragon, known as Bei Long Ma, is sometimes known as White Dragon Horse. Before he is reduced to the state of a horse, he actually has his normal dragon form, and he and Wukong have a little bit of a scuffle early on, when he mistakenly eats the horse of Tan Zhang. And in the gameplay we see what seems to be the actual Sun Wukong with his signature armour on a cloud chasing after a white dragon. And then we also see the Destined One fighting a white dragon. Could it be that we get to replay this event playing as the Sun Wukong, and then as the Destined One we also need to bring the white dragon horse to heel? Who knows? Then there's the potential that we see Sandy, Sandy is a demon that is called, yes, Sandy, as a reference to his riverside nature and the place that he calls home when he's a demon. And in the gameplay, we do fight what seems to be a sand demon. And we will answer the question of whether this means this is a one-for-one retelling of the story or a homage to it later on in this video, but for now, just be aware of these 4 characters and that we may see them in the game. The journey itself is done in an episodic manner, with the group coming up against various challenges and demons, as well as other conflicts in each chapter. This will be reflected in our own journey throughout the game, as we can see there are numerous demons we will have to overcome in the gameplay trailers and reveals. Some of these enemies are the Centipede Demon, the Scorpion Lord, the Tiger Vanguard, the Taoist Mi, the Mukak Chief, and the Blood Moon General, to name but a few. The journey isn't just a journey in the physical sense, it is a journey of redemption and enlightenment, and the Sun Wukong we meet at the end of Journey to the West is far different from the reckless monkey who rebelled against heaven. Sun Wukong learns humility, patience, and when to stay one's hand. At the end of his journey, he is redeemed and earns Buddhahood and passes into legend, as it's ultimately Sun Wukong who does a lot of the heavy lifting throughout the book, defending Tang Sanzang from a multitude of dangers and monsters, as well as learning some important lessons for himself. But this begs the question, how does Black Myth Wukong fit into this narrative? Where does it happen in the story timeline? Screen Rant did an excellent article in which they translated a lot of the dialogue found in the 13-minute gameplay reveal trailer from 2020, and I'd highly recommend you read that article in its entirety. It will be linked below. This article tells us that the Earth God featured in the 13-minute gameplay reveal, which is the small NPC that appears at certain points, is lamenting about the burning down of a Guanyin monastery several years ago. This is a direct reference to the events of Journey of the West, and as a result, we can assume that the game is set after the events of this book, if indeed the game is happening after this burning down of the monastery. There are other hints in some of the other videos as well that the game is set after Journey to the West. For example, the developers also released a 6-minute in-game cinematic, which is absolutely stunning and I would highly recommend you check it out. In this cinematic we see what must be spider demons, led by a mother, or matriarch. This is clearly a reference to the spider demons of the book, who capture San Zhang before Wukong intercedes and kills the spider demons, with there being 7 of these spider demon sisters in total. An interesting thing about this cinematic is it seems to be that we have a sort of POV. We are the POV of a captured prisoner, a groom who has been brought here by the daughters of the spider matriarch against their will. The spider daughters speak of an event that happened long before they were born, an event where the matriarch and this unknown POV met. The matriarch of the family then comes out of her room and reaffirms that this groom is someone that she has met before. My speculation is that this matriarch is a survivor of the original spider demons from Journey to the West, one who escaped death at the hands of Sun Wukong. Now, we as the player have been captured by this survivor and her offspring, again suggesting a homage to the original story, but most likely taking place after the events of the book. Many years to have aged this spider demoness soul. Then there is the old monk in the 13-minute gameplay reveal, who is speaking about the story of Sun Wukong in the past tense. Interestingly, this monk himself appears to have monkey-like features. We therefore get hints that the protagonist, the player character, may not be the Sun Wukong. The most striking example of this comes in the same 13-minute reveal when the Sun Wukong blocks the player character from finishing off the wolf boss. There can be no doubt that this second figure is the Sun Wukong. We see some characters inscribed on the golden staff of this second Sun Wukong, and it reads Ruyi Jingu Bang. This is the name of the Sun Wukong's weapon, leaving us in no doubt that this is the original Sun Wukong. So what is going on here? Who is the old monk, and who is the player character? Well, this is where I get to the speculative part of this video, where I attempt to predict how the story will go. Clearly the player character is very similar in appearance to Sun Wukong, yet lacks his signature armour and golden staff. According to that same article by Screen Rant I referenced earlier, they translated the fact that the Earth God comments on how similar the player character looks to Sun Wukong. We have a tie to the Monkey King, and yet we are not him precisely anyway. My first guess is that the player character is an aspect of the Monkey King, a mortal element left behind or sent to Earth for some particular purpose, while the Sun Wukong has ascended to Buddhahood. Perhaps Sun Wukong has the need for the old Monkey King to do some task, a task that he cannot do himself as a Buddha. The old monk that is relaying the story could therefore be this version of Sun Wukong who has been left behind on the mortal plane after the events of the game, and he has been left to age, not being immortal like the original Sun Wukong. I've seen some people speculating that the player character is perhaps one of Wukong's many copies who has gone rogue or has taken on a life of its own, but I don't agree with this. The player character can make copies of his own and can transform, directly having the powers of old Sun Wukong. The copies that are made are basically elements of the original Wukong. It's his hair that is transformed, and thus I don't think a copy, essentially a hair of Wukong, could have the ability to make further copies, nor have Sun Wukong's transformative abilities. There is the other possibility, that this is just a completely new character, a new monkey who has risen and is following the path and teachings of Sun Wukong. I do lean towards the former, that this player character is an element of Sun Wukong. There are too many similarities in my opinion, to the point where I think it's highly unlikely that they are not directly related. Either way, the game story will seem to play through the events of the true Wukong story, as we do see gameplay of what seems to be Sun Wukong in his full regalia, fighting the Celestial Army, the event that I discussed earlier. Bringing it all together, this is what I speculate the setup will be. We are an aspect of Sun Wukong, an earthly remnant, and we are following in his steps in our own journey to the west, and that this is something that takes place later, after the journey to the west. We are learning similar lessons that he did, fighting demons like Sun Wukong once did, and perhaps even meeting those exact same demons, like the spider demons. But perhaps there will be dream sequences, flashbacks, introductory segments where we get to play through some of those iconic events, like fighting the Celestial Army, and that explains how we play as the Sun Wukong in his armour and weaponry. Indeed, the monsters that I cited earlier are inspired by enemies and passages from the original book. The Scorpion Demon, the Tiger Vanguard, the Doist Mi, and the Mukak Chief. These all have some source of inspiration from the book, so even if the story of the game is set place after the original journey to the west, it's clearly going to mirror that journey. There's of course the possibility that I'm entirely wrong, and that this game will not take place after the original book, but is a reinterpretation of it, playing into what the old monkey tells us in that first trailer, that no one knows the true story, and he is going to tell us it. And any inconsistencies can be drummed up to the fact that the original story is seen by this monkey as a myth. Only time will tell, but what is clear is that Black Myth Wukong plays homage to the original story in a very faithful way, but there will be some surprises along the way. So thanks guys, that is my take on the information and media that we have seen so far for Black Myth Wukong. Again, I would like to thank Game Science for sponsoring this video, as I had a great time diving into the lore of this game. But let me know your thoughts below. Do you think my interpretation at this stage is accurate, or do you think I'm missing something in the gameplay trailers that I haven't pointed out? As I've said, I've kind of cherry-picked bits from the different trailers and cinematics that I wanted to talk about, but you can watch these trailers in their uninterrupted wholeness on the original channel. But until next time guys, I will see you on the path to enlightenment. Take care and have a wonderful evening.